Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. I'm going to kick this video off discussing the performance targets as well as the specifications of the RX 6700 XT. These cards are looking like they are going to be very impressive indeed and will serve as the linchpin in AMD's strategy going forward against mid-range offerings from Nvidia, such as the RTX 3060. In fact, we've already seen how Nvidia are forced to change some of the specifications of their card, including the fact that the RTX 3060 will feature 12 gigabytes of VRAM. So let's talk about the specifications and the performance targets of the 6700 XT then. Andres Schilling has recently taken to Twitter confirming that the card will indeed feature 12 gigabytes of VRAM, along with a resolution target of 1440p. AMD haven't officially named the card, they've simply said that the GPU of some description for the mid-range will release in the first half of 2021. If you've been following the channel for any length of time, will know that I've had a plethora of RDNA 2 leaks, and I have previously leaked the fact that AMD would be targeting 1440p for the GPU. I can confirm that now. A couple of other sources have told me that yes, the card should outperform the RTX 3060, and it has definitely caused Nvidia a lot of sweating behind the scenes. Furthermore, the card will feature up to 40 compute units and most likely using the Nave 22 die, though the RX 6700, not the XT variant, will allegedly feature 36 compute units. Again, there will be a 192-bit memory bus for both the 6700 and 6700 XT, and critically, of course, they will also feature 12 gigabytes of VRAM. This is quite a lot of memory for a mid-range card, but because AMD are able to use GDDR6 rather than relying on, let's say, GDDR6X, it means it's a bit cheaper for them. And naturally, we will also see the Infinity Cache. I'm hearing some mixed things about that. One person has told me that it's 64 megabytes, so exactly half of what we see with the 6800 XT, for example, and someone else has told me that it's 96 megabytes. Either way, it should be more than enough performance. And speaking of performance, what about the performance? As Andres mentioned, yeah, 1440p is the resolution target. I'm told that it can technically run games, of course, at 4K, but AMD are not going to be marketing it as a 4K card. It's mostly going to be focused on pushing the fact that it's a great value 1440p offering. Naturally, it would also do really well for high refresh rate 1080p gaming, but yeah, it's probably a bit much for a 1080p display, so we'll probably find itself most at home paired with, let's say, a Ryzen 3600X or a 5600X and a 1440p monitor. I was also told, and this is quite critical, that it will easily outperform the 5700 XT. This is through several reasons, of course. It features basically the same number of compute units, but it also has way higher clock frequencies and just as critically has obviously the IPC gains and architectural improvements with RDNA 2. So basically speaking, this should easily outperform the 5700 XT. I'm hearing that minimum it should be around 20% faster, but most likely it's going to be way faster than that, honestly. This card should easily outperform the RX 5700 XT. It's basically going to be a replacement. After all, RDNA 1 lacks features such as hardware-based ray tracing and variable rate shading, whereas this actually features those. And in terms of performance, it will, well, basically just decimate it. This is through the fact that it's got obviously higher clock frequencies, IPC gains, better architecture, and so on and so on. So at minimum, we should be seeing at least a 20-ish% improvement over the RX 5700 XT, although of course, as always, it will depend upon the game and the resolution and all of that jazz. Ultimately, though, this card is probably going to be a really nice GPU for those who are trying to purchase a card for 1440p. It's going to be really interesting in terms of pricing. I think it's still a bit early at the moment to kind of mention about pricing, but of course AMD will definitely want to put a ton of pressure on Nvidia, and we know that the RTX 3060 is going to be retailing at around $330 US. That's MSRP. However, there's a couple of critical points here. The RTX 3060 Ti, that features a Founders Edition card, and that's so important, of course, because it allows you to pick up a, well, card at MSRP. Whereas when you don't have a FE card, then obviously you're down to AIB pricing. And AIB pricing has been, well, it's been pricing all right. So yeah, I suspect that in theory, I mean, we've already seen some leaks actually of the pricing of RTX 3060. That is not officially, I mean, Nvidia have already briefed us and said that, yeah, it's 330 bucks in theory for the MSRP, but we've already seen some retailers kind of hint that it's way more than that. It's like $360, $370, which is really close to what we're seeing for the RTX 3060 Ti. Hopefully that resolves itself and there will be some cheaper entry model cards. For example, I don't know if I was going to say AMD, MSI still do like the Aero cards, for example, but something like that, you know, like a basic blower design. I know they're not exactly the best in terms of acoustics and stuff, but hey, at least you've got a card that's, you know, not kind of getting into the next SKU territory in terms of pricing. And yeah, that's kind of the difference here because from what I'm told now from a couple of people, the RX 6700 and 6700 XT, they will definitely have reference designs. And AMD obviously were going to cancel the reference designs of the 6800 and so on, but they wisely chose to not do that. Basically, Nvidia and AMD don't really love producing the reference designs, especially long term. But obviously they've been so critical in the pricing war at the moment. So hopefully the supply will be reasonable, which I personally feel is kind of like saying, well, hopefully that really hungry lion won't eat me. I mean, sure, I'm covered in like barbecue sauce, but I'm sure it'll be fine. But yeah, being serious for a moment, hopefully the supply will be okay, and we will see the 6700 XT kind of available. And one thing that makes me think that it's possibly going to do better is that by the time the card launches, in theory anyway, the supply issues won't be quite as constrained. Um, Although it depends on who you ask. So yeah, with any luck anyway, we'll have some decent solutions from AMD. It seems that Nvidia are going to beat them to the punch with the RTX 3060, but after that, of course, we'll see the 6700 XT. What happens if Samsung and AMD go skipping down the street? Well, it's an unnamed Exynos SoC. Of course, this is something that's not new. We know that AMD have been teaming up with Samsung for the production of GPU and their mobile solutions. But yeah, there's even some rumors that AMD might task Samsung for the production of some silicon. I was talking about this a day or two ago, and it's really interesting in theory if this occurs. And we can imagine that there could be certain silicon that AMD would task TSMC and certain silicon that they would task Samsung. Obviously, if you're designing a particular chip around, let's say, one fab, you can't just easily copy and paste it into Photoshop and change a couple of things and then throw it into a different, in an entirely different fab. But even so, you could split production. For example, certain GPUs or the MLA that I was talking about yesterday, that could be produced by Samsung. However, I'm going to get us back onto topic. We're going to change the direction of the truck again. What's really interesting is that the benchmark for this Exynos SoC has actually leaked online. And yeah, it's kind of fast. How fast? Fast. So this unnamed Radeon Exynos SoC, I'm just going to call it Exynos for the sake of all of our sanity, has been pitted against an Apple Bionic A14. That's the same SoC which is found in the iPhone 12 Pro, for your FYI. So Manhattan 3.1 benchmark, we have 182 FPS for the Exynos versus 146-ish for the A14. So that's around 25% inch faster. Aztec though, and Aztec High School, yeah, it basically destroys the A14 from a great height. It's almost double the performance, which I'm sure you'll agree is absolutely mind-blowing. It's ridiculously faster than what Apple are producing. Unfortunately, we don't know all of the specifications of it, and that's putting it extremely mildly. We basically know nothing in terms of the specifications of it, and we also don't know when it's going to launch. There has been some reports that it might launch this year, and other reports that it could be delayed, but because Samsung are facing so much pressure at the moment in the mobile market, they are allegedly wanting to bring it forward versus like a slightly later date. Either way, the main reason I find this interesting, because I'm not a huge mobile person, at least in terms of like cell phones. You know, they're cool and all, but I'm not someone who does like a whole bunch on my cell phone. He says he accidentally hits one of the lights with his finger. I'm more someone who I'm a desktop whore, basically. I just love desktop. And that's, mobile's kind of cool, but I just don't really work on it or play games on it. But still, for me, it's really interesting because it's such a large TAM, it's such a large total available market that AMD can address here with the licensing of their GPU technology. And this is obviously tons of money. And I mentioned recently that one of my sources was kind of explaining to me that, yeah, AMD are just throwing so much more money now into RTG, the Radeon Technology Group, and previously, it was obviously the CPUs like Zen really saved AMD's butts back in the day. The Zen 1 architecture was a pretty damn amazing architecture in terms of how it differed from what they had previously with like Excavator and Bulldozer. It was like a totally different ground-up design. And now we're starting to see this really pay dividends with the income that they're receiving to the GPU division. And RDNA 1 was pretty damn good. RDNA 2 is really good. And as I mentioned in one of my recent exclusives, RDNA 3 is looking to be insane. It is looking to be insanity. But yeah, I am very much looking forward to seeing what AMD can do with all of these additional R&D funds. I would also like to spend just a moment to discuss a GPU which is coming from China. Now, I'm probably going to butcher the name terribly, so please let me know how to pronounce this in the comments, but Tianshu Zhixin is basically a GPU which is being created on a 7nm node, and according to the preliminary data we have in terms of the specifications, it's actually really close in terms of data center performance to what AMD and Nvidia are offering for their high-end cards. To be clear here, we're talking like the MI100 or the top Ampere GPUs. Now, these are not coming to gaming exactly right now, but it does put AMD and Nvidia, as well as Intel, of course, when they finally get their button gear and release the XC cards to both gamers as well as high-performance computing, it puts them on notice to say that, hey, you're going to be facing competition in the world stage. So this GPU is on a 7nm process. We'll get to that. And it's created on about 24-ish billion transistors. According to what their information they're providing in terms of specifications, the GPU can put out FP16 performance of around 147 T-flops. To put that into some level of context, the MI100 is about 184 T-flops, whereas the Ampere 100, that's around 78 T-flops. Although we also have this GPU being able to support other things such as FP32, of course, the aforementioned FP16, BF16, integer 32, integer 16, and finally, our friend and buddy, integer 8. Now, this GPU is known as Big Island, and as I mentioned a moment ago, it's on a 7nm process. However, the 7nm process has not been announced. It's thought to be TSMC's 7nm process, but again, it's not officially been confirmed yet. So the tape out for this GPU actually was finalized in mid last year, so the production of this GPU shouldn't be, well, too much longer, assuming of course it ever sees the light of day, but it should do. And again, while it's not something that we are most likely going to be throwing into our rigs anytime soon, the very fact of the matter is that there is more competition in the market. And I'll be interested to see how this actually affects things, whether it even comes out in the West. It may simply be relegated to China. As we all know, China have a thing at the moment. They have like a mandate where they want to reduce their reliance on Western technology. And yeah, this would be interesting. The last thing I want to tackle today actually concerns Sega. And I know this is a really big departure from the previous topics, but I find it of particular interest. So, yeah, Sega obviously are not quite the driving force in the industry that they were, especially back in the kind of 90s. And I've got really fond memories still of like the Genesis and the Sega Saturn. And for me anyway, like I actually really want to play through Shining the Holy Ark again on the Saturn. I don't know why, I've just got this hankering. I'm trying to complete the medium first, and I'm like reserving myself for the Shining the Holy Ark. I'm like, yeah, I really want to play it for some reason. And also Panzer Dragoon Saga. But, getting back to the topic, yeah, apparently Sega have been taking a real hammering in the arcade/pachinko division, and this is of course because of the global pandemic which is going on. And in terms of gaming, they're doing okay, like the console and PC game sales are not doing too shabby, But a report is that Sega Sammy are going to be splitting into two divisions. The first are going to focus on video games, well, consoles and PC gaming and so on and so on. And then the other will focus on arcade machines as well as pachinko. Now, I find this of super interest, not only because what this could mean, but and this is not insider information, I just want to stress that, but it does make me wonder if this is the company that is rumored to be purchased by Microsoft, because we've been hearing so many times now that Microsoft are going to gobble up a company. Obviously, they bought ZeniMax, which is a huge acquisition, absolutely ginormous acquisition, but then several others have recently stated that there's going to be another purchase that's like ZeniMax kind of size. Amy was covering this in another video, I believe, a couple of days ago maybe, and the rumor was then, I think it was like Capcom. However, with this recent filing, it kind of seems more like something that would precede a purchase by Microsoft. Now, again, I'm not saying this is true, and I'm not, I'm not having any insider information here. This is not privileged, but there have been several rumors, several kind of stories that Sega are going to be bought out by Microsoft, and then it's debunked or it doesn't happen. And of course, ultimately, these discussions are always held by different companies. So for all we know, Microsoft have had like conversations in the past with Sega, they've had conversations in the past with Konami, and they've maybe nothing's come of it. I mean, there was even that famous story where Microsoft were apparently trying to buy Nintendo, and Nintendo basically just laughed at them for the entire meeting, which I imagine was super uncomfortable for the Microsoft executives whenever you're trying to say something. Someone's just like, you're funny. But yeah, long story short, I would be very interested to see if Sega were purchased by Microsoft. From my point of view, I don't see Microsoft really buying Square. I don't see that happening. I'm somewhat skeptical of Electronic Arts. Actually, I think it was Amy said it was Electronic Arts, not Capcom. I don't see them buying Electronic Arts. Maybe it's just me. I mean, they do technically have like their EA Pass or whatever it's called on Xbox Live, and obviously Microsoft have on Game Pass, and Microsoft have a pretty good relationship with EA. But I don't think they would buy EA. Just in terms of bang for buck, personally, I think that Sega would be a great complement to Microsoft just because of the IPs. And some of the IPs that Sega are not doing anything with, they're just totally dormant. It's just bewildering to me. It is baffling, it is heartbreaking, and it is frustrating. Yes, I know all of those things mean pretty much the same identical thing, but I mean, just for example, I know Game Pass is a really hot and contentious topic, but games from Sega, which Microsoft commissioned, would be really great Game Pass fillers. For example, a new Streets of Rage 5, or Golden Axe, or Afterburner. These are games which you could create for relatively small amounts of cash, but would still be really well received. Like, look at Streets of Rage 4, for example. It was really well received, but imagine if Microsoft kind of gave them the cash for that. It was also, of course, available for general sale as well. But yeah, I think titles like that would be really great Game Pass fodder, where they're kind of one and done. And then obviously you've got the benefit too of more legacy IPs. For example, I don't know, another Virtua Fighter. That would be awesome. Or perhaps even a game such as I mentioned it earlier, like kind of a Shining game maybe. So I don't necessarily know if I'd like Sega to be bought out, because it would kind of suck for people who primarily game on the PlayStation to not be able to enjoy those experiences. But kind of also, I mean, from my perspective, those IPs have been so damn dormant and nothing's been done with them. Like, Sega are so frustrating in some ways. Like, Sega are basically Nintendo, but Nintendo are successful. I know that's probably going to annoy a lot of people, and goodness knows that Nintendo frustrate the hell out of me. But yeah, like Sega, they do so many baffling things, and they have so many cool IPs which are just not done anything with. And obviously, they're not in the position where they can be as risk. They can't be the risk takers they used to be. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think Sega would end up being gobbled up by Microsoft, or do you think it's going to be another company, or do you think it's all just bluster? And with all of that said, thank you very much for watching the video. If you've made it this far, please leave a thumbs up, because YouTube land, and it works on social engagement and all of that jazz. And also, if you can subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon, we're getting closer and closer and closer. We're inching towards 100,000 subscribers. And that to me is super bizarre. So if you would, of course, subscribe and also click the bell icon, that would be amazing. With that said, have an amazing day. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.